And at this point, we have a second panel discussion, and is on the topic, the role of higher education institutions in achieving the Continental initiatives. And by this, we are looking at Agenda 2063 and CESA 2016 to 2025. On that note, I would like to call on the moderator for this session. He's in the person of Mr. Kwesi Acquah, and he is with the Research and Academic Planning Directorate here at the AAU. Shall we please give him a round of applause whilst he comes?
Okay, thank you very much, distinguished professors and distinguished academics, students, and everyone here. We are going straight to the panel discussion, and we are privileged to have Professor Abdelfattah Bilal Abdelsalam Elabbas, and he is the Dean, Faculty of Engineering, African International University, Sudan, and he's going to chair the session for us. Shall we put our hands together for Prof as he respectfully takes his seat? Thank you, Prof. We are also privileged to have the President of Accra Institute of Technology in the person of Professor Clement Dzidonu, and he is the first panel member to be introduced. Thank you, Prof. We have the Quality Assurance and Harmonization expert here at the Association of African Universities, and she is in the person of Dr. Violet Makuku. Again, we have the immediate past Secretary General of All Africa Students Union, and then he is also a lecturer at the Business Administration Department, University of Professional Studies, and the person of Mr. Fred Awaah. Mr. Fred, thank you so much. We have the Vice Chancellor, Alzaiem Alzaghari, University, Sudan, and he is in the person of Professor Siham Mohamed Ahmed Bakhit. Prof, I hope I didn't murder your name. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are our distinguished professors and academics who are going to lead us in the discussion. And my name is Kwesi, and I'll be moderating the session as well. So I think on this note, I can take my seat, and then we set the ball rolling. Okay. So a special good afternoon to you, my distinguished panelists. Our task this afternoon is very simple, and our task is that we would want to understand the Continental education strategy for Africa. And we also have a lot of continental initiatives as well. First of all, we have the Agenda 2063, and it is a 50-year development plan for the entire continent. Out of Agenda 2063, we have the Continental education strategy, and that is supposed to spearhead or direct or kind of give us focus what we must expect from our education systems or institutions from the period of 10 years, that is 2016 and 2025. A lot has been done, a lot is still going on, but as higher education institutions would want to understand what role we must play in making sure that we are able to achieve these initiatives. But for the purpose of those of us who may not even have heard of Agenda 2063, let me ask, how many of us have heard of Agenda 2063? You put your right hand up. You've heard of it. Oh, feel confident and put your hand up if you've heard of Agenda 2063. Great. How many of us, those of us who have heard about the strategy, how many of us have read? Maybe not close reading, but skimming or scanning or whatever. All right. How many of us have not heard at all what Agenda 2063? Good. I'm so much happy that the young ones in the room may not have heard of it, but there is a strategy or there's a development plan that is supposed to spearhead the development of the African continent for the next 50 years. And I always say that the people who crafted the agenda I think the youngest may be in the 50s. So should the Lord bless all of them with additional 50 years? I don't know if that is possible. Most of them may not be around, but it will take you and I to be in existence, all other things being equal, to make sure that we are able to spearhead whatever we have. In this 50-year development plan, we have 7 aspirations, and so that is what will inform our discussion this afternoon. And then also we look at a bit of the continental education strategy, and that is what we are going to focus our discussions on. And so when the African Union celebrated its 50th anniversary, prior to the 50th anniversary, there has been a lot of development initiatives and continental frameworks. There were, or I don't know whether it's in existence, Abuja Treaty was in existence, which was supposed to spearhead our development in the 1980s, which was developed by IMF and then the World Bank. We also had a Lagos Plan of Action and a lot of plans. But fortunately or unfortunately, some of these initiatives may not have worked to expectation. And so when the African Union celebrated its 50th anniversary, the heads of state of Africa came together and then they crafted their Agenda 2063. We don't want to celebrate the next 50 years and also say that we may not have or we haven't achieved what is in there. And so we have our distinguished panelists. They are ready now, and we want to understand what we must do as our role to ensure that we achieve these continental strategies. I would give the opportunity to our chair, who will give his opening remarks, and after that, we'll go straight to the discussion. Shall we put our hands together for Prof as he gives his opening remarks?
Thank you. Thank you. Good day to you. I am very happy to be among you in Ghana. Accra is a very welcoming city, and her people are beautiful people. We would like to start our speech by what Bill Gates said. He said, we hire intelligent people to tell us what to do, not to tell them what to do. This is the delegation of the AAU of Africa. As a matter of fact, higher education institute should lead the stride towards the future of Africa. Africa is full of national resources. It is high time to facilitate to develop Africa for Africans. We don't lack intellectuals. We have a lot of scientists. This is very clear abroad in the West. There are enormous scientists in their areas. Our problem is the management, coordination, and of our resources. It is a good idea to have a platform that coordinate between the capital holders, the researchers, the government, executive, so as to cook out the work done on the paper in the research and bring it to us as a product. That's innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdelfattah Elabbas. Yes, Bilal, thank you so much for your opening remarks. We'll move straight to the discussion, and we'll start with the continental, we'll start with Agenda 2063, which speaks broadly of what we expect to see or to have in the next 50 years. And so it is titled The Africa We Want. I don't know the Africa you want to see in the next 5, 6, 10 years, 50 years, but our panelists here have in mind the Africa we want. But let me just set the ball rolling by giving us the overall vision of the Agenda 2063. And we are expecting to have a continent that is integrated, prosperous, and peaceful, which is also driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in international arena. I would want to take the view of Professor Dzidonu, what he makes of the overall vision of the Agenda 2063 before we go into details. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, moderator, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes. Agenda 2063, as the moderator stated in his introduction, is one of the many other agendas that Africa has been putting in place in order to transform its economy and the way of life of its people. And as you said, unfortunately, those earlier initiatives, they might have yielded some few results here and there, but the aspirations and expectations of some of those were not really achieved. We can talk about the Lagos plan. We can talk about more recently the NEPAD agenda, the new initiative for African development, which was really, really promoted by the head of states. If I recall, the NEPAD plan said it's not for all Africans. You must get in by selection because of the previous experience that we have on the continent, that everything goes, everybody is a member once you're an African country. It was selective. To get in as a member country on the NEPAD agenda, you must prove seriousness. But even that, later on it was opened up and everybody became a member. And then not very much happened. I must tell you that NEPAD even has a plan, an action plan. I remember being involved in the ICT version of the plan. So Agenda 2063 is our way of saying, let's have a go at it again. Let's have a go at it. Because of all the continents in this world, we are always behind. And I was a little bit disappointed when in this small room, quite a number of people haven't even heard about it. So it's quite important for us to determine who is this agenda targeted at. Is it African policymakers? Is it African government? Is it educational institutions? Or just African people? Now, if this is a flagship action agenda, if quite a number of us don't even know about it, then it shows that we are going round again in circle. So it's extremely important for my opponent that we need to find a strategy to make mainstream this agenda into things that we do. And for us, as education people, specifically higher education, I think we must find a way to mainstream the agendas 2063, basically in terms of the programs we offer, in terms of developing the human capacity that is needed to drive this continent. I am very, very convinced that most of our aspirations of the Agenda 2063 have to be driven by human resources or human capital. Why? Because we are moving into the knowledge economy, the knowledge society. And the only ingredient which drive the knowledge economy and knowledge society is knowledge. And we are the providers and the producers of that knowledge. So if nobody else takes the Agenda 2063 serious, we must take it serious. So it's extremely important. Let me throw in this before I land. You know, in 20 years' time, Africa's share of the working age population will be the highest in the world. The working age population is the age between 15 and 65. In 20 years' time, we will be registering the highest growth in the working age population. Some people have been arguing that in 20 years' time, the rest of the world must come to Africa to seek the human resources they need in order to develop. Those of you who are following the news, recently Japan said for the first time, they are going to what? Meet people, get a visa to come and work in Japan. Because the Japan population is aging. We are very concerned that they may not have the human resources to develop. But here, we in Africa, we are the only continent who will have a higher share of working age population. Now, this higher share of working age population, if they don't have they don't transform into a human resource to develop the economy, you can find out that if these disasters we have in Africa now, it will be a dress rehearsal. So for me, given Agenda 2063, given the fact that we have an asset as the only continent which will have people who could be transformed into a knowledge people to transform the economy, if we miss these two opportunities, I don't think anybody will forgive us. So I think Agenda 2063, at least within the content of higher education, we must take it serious. What AAU must start thinking of, how can you mainstream this into our programs? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dzidonu. Let me go to Dr. Violet Makuku. Looking at the overall theme or vision of Agenda 2063, what do you make of it as a higher education expert?
Thank you very much, Kwesi. For me, when I look at Agenda 2063, I think it's a guiding document that is succinct and highly pertinent to higher education in terms of guiding us. But key to Agenda 2063, it's mostly the emphasis on the participation of the youth. That is very, very key. Therefore, with this event, AAU started with this theme also in order to push that agenda of putting our youth forward. We have young lecturers in the institutions. Are we giving them room? When they say something, are we also listening? We have students in the institutions in terms of curricula. Are we giving them room to contribute so that we take into consideration their ideas of tomorrow? But you are going to realize that Africa has got this big youth bulge, like what Professor Dzidonu has said. And what are we doing about this as the human resource for now and for the future? It's very, very key, and the message is also clear that let's give room to the young, to the youth. If you check even African Union Commission, most of the programs that they did in 2017, 2018 had a lot to do with the youth, because throughout the world it has been realized that this is where we are going. But apart from that, the Agenda 2063 is saying without integration, continental integration, harmonization, we can't make it. Because on our own, what we have on the ground currently plays against us, because they act as barriers and hindrances. I can take, for example, the Continental passport. It's already out, and I think they are taking it stage by stage from African Union. That's a plus. I met somebody who was in trade and commerce coming from Gambia on one of my trips, and they are ahead with transport and trade integration, also harmonization. And this is the issue, to say, let's try and harmonize in all the fields so that when we harmonize, we reduce the barriers and we become one people. I want to refer to a few pages on the Agenda 2063.
No, we will go into the details, but we wanted your initial comment on the overall vision, which talks about an integrated, prosperous continent. So if we are done with that, then we could move on, and then we'll go into details, if that is okay.
Okay. So to just wrap up,
fine, that's
I
fine.
just want to say that, therefore, it is important for us to understand the major tenets of the Agenda 2063
Absolutely.
in order to articulate it. But the third thing, Prof, you have just seen this group. We have done workshops and we have had groups of more than 300 people where you find that only less than 10 or 20 people know about the Agenda 2063. They know about the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. Some have got overviews. They don't even have the details. So I'm saying we have a lot of work to do in terms of dissemination.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Violet Makuku. Let me take your views, Mr. Fred Awaah. You have been working around this for some time now. When you look at the theme or the central vision of the strategy, what do you make of it as a higher education expert?
Well, I want to say that what we are doing now, the discussion we're having now on the Agenda 2063 is not new. And of course, truth remains that there have been other predecessor continental initiatives. Now, the Agenda 2063 is a product of these past predecessor initiatives and then individual national strategic plans. Now, in 1980, you will recall we had the Lagos Plan of Action, where all African heads of states gathered in Nigeria, Lagos, to deliberate on the state of the continent and then a holistic way forward for the country. 11 years down the lane, somewhere in 1991, the Abuja Treaty also came. It was birthed out of the same thinking of the Lagos Plan of Action. Now, going forward, somewhere in 2001, NEPAD came into being. Okay, I think that is in line with the aspiration 2 of the Agenda 2063 now, that is the issue of integration. Now, all of this didn't seem to be solving the key issues of Africa. So somewhere in 2010, then we did have the program for infrastructural development. Yeah, creating infrastructure that connects the entirety of Africa together. So all of these, together with national plans, is the product of what we call the Agenda 2063 today. Now, of course, where I sit, I want to say that the Agenda 2063 is a good vision. Now, if you don't have an extreme long-term plan, especially for a continent like Africa, then indeed it is going to be difficult for us to identify the key thematic areas that we need to work on, and then look at implementation strategy year by year, or 5 years by 5 years, in order that we see where our strengths lie, that is review within periodic frames, and then also look at where our weaknesses that are to be corrected. So in my opinion, I do think that Agenda 2063 is a good initiative. But if you permit me, I would want to say that one key challenge of the Agenda 2063 is awareness. I was privileged to be part of this process when it was launched in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in the year 2013. I think I also had an opportunity to give a speech on these same lines. But reality remains that as we sit today, we want to discuss the role of higher education in achieving the Agenda 2063. Reality is that a lot of higher education practitioners are unaware of the existence of Agenda 2063. So the baseline for us as higher education practitioners is one, to imbibe ourselves with the tenets of Agenda 2063, understanding the 7 thematic areas. What do they stand for? How do they fall into our own agenda? And in whichever way you look at it, all of the issues have to do with education. So my introductory comments are that the Agenda 2063 is one that is very good for our continent. It only needs periodic reviews and also understanding by stakeholders such as higher education players, so that we will understand it to educate our peers and also educate the students, okay, so that together we can get it achieved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Awaah. Professor Siham, the same question goes to you, your initial comment on the overall vision of the strategy.
Okay, thank you very much. I have the last chance, of course. They cover some information I want to say, but for me, Agenda 2063, first of all, it is a long-term agenda. That means we have to put it in phases first. And before that, I agree with them that we have to raise the awareness about this agenda, because most of the African countries are not aware about this agenda 2063. So after awareness, we have to make some fragmentation for this agenda, because it's very, very, very long in terms of assessment, in terms of even implementation, and terms of evaluation at the end. And if we look inside this agenda, we find that in terms of role of higher education, we find that most of the universities in different countries in Africa or in the continent, they already implement most of this agenda, because it highlighted all the concepts on the education, knowledge transformation, peace, and everything as we know in details in the agenda. So for the higher education that they are now implementing this agenda, maybe after awareness, after these phases for the agenda, we need to make some alignment. We may need some steering body so as to make this alignment towards the objectives, because it's too difficult to have these scattered activities throughout over the continent and without anybody, so as to make some alignment of these activities towards the general objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's put our hands together for our panelists for the introductory comment. And it's amazing. One thing that comes out clearly from your presentation is that a lot of us are not aware, per the little survey we did in the room. But it's also surprising that if I should ask, how many of us have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals? I think everybody in this room may have heard of the SDG. If you do a survey of the African continent and you find out how many of our national president or government are aware of the SDGs, I'm sure everybody would say something about it. If you ask our vice chancellors, how many of them have heard of the SDGs, I'm pretty much sure that everybody has heard. And when we are drawing up our strategies and interventions in our schools, we try to align all the things we do to the SDGs. Let me ask, maybe in 1 minute, why is it so much difficult that after 5 years, because 2013 to 2018 is 5 years, that this strategy has been existing, why has it taken us so long for people to get to know of it? And so now we are 5 years behind, so we have 45 years that we're talking about. Why has it been so difficult? Let me take your view, Dr. Makuku, and I'll go to Prof as well. Why has it been so difficult for us to relate to the Agenda 2063 document? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kwesi. I want to start with a joke which I heard from one of my former vice chancellors. He said that I would say this is rumors or gossip so that people can spread it. If it is rumors, it spreads very fast like a wildfire. Now look at this important Agenda 2063. It has been mooted there at the continental level. And who is behind this important document? It's our ministers of higher education in the 54 African countries, alongside our presidents during the AAU summit. So I think there is unfinished business. That's what I think, because when they deliberate on these things, communiques do come, some documents do come, processed and finished documents like this one. So they go there to the summit. When they go back to their countries, we expect them to continue now with the dissemination through the various tools and instruments within their ministries and within the country. But is this happening? It may not be happening. Secondly, also, let's remember that ministers, normally it's a post that comes, it's a political post. So what happens is when one minister comes, he or she knows that there's this important document to be disseminated. But sooner or later, their term of office ends. When it ends, there's no succession plan. Nothing is ended or taken over. And also, I think there's a part of us as Africans, I don't want to generalize, but I've seen it many times that we think that if we have some knowledge which we know alone and we are not sharing, nobody else knows about it, we are empowered. On the contrary, when you share and people know that you are in the habit of sharing knowledge and information, I think that's when you become a hero or a heroine, because people refer to you now and then. So I want to touch on that one, but I know there are many other issues
that will come up.
That will come up, because it's not only those ministers, there are other key stakeholders. Like now, from here, are you going to disseminate? As AAU, we are going to attach all these documents. We have done this in workshops, but after the workshops, what are our participants doing? Okay. Vice chancellors in particular, they may know, some do not know, okay. But are they telling their university communities that there are these things which need to be used? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me take your view, Prof. Professor Dzidonu.
Yes.
Why is it so difficult for us to drum Agenda 2063 vis-a-vis the SDGs?
Well, it's interesting you made a point about sustainable development goals. We succeeded the Millennium Development Goals. You see, look at the agency which promoted the Millennium Development Goals and then the SDGs. That is the UN. The UN has a lot of resources. They took it upon themselves, not the nation states. Not the nation states, to promote this. Advertisers bring the big guns blazing, and they did a good job. The SDG and the Millennium Development Goal is also tied to donor activities. That if you want some money in the area of health in order to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, then you must do ABCD, or the donors will not give you money. It energized the African government to do that. They wrote projects in order to implement this, and that is there. So there's some little money there. There is also some mechanisms there in order to mainstream it into our development agenda. When you come to the Agenda 2063, it's a political document produced by the African Union, who doesn't have the same teeth as the United Nations when it comes to propagating its views and its programs. AU have never been there. You see, so this is not, it is not just because of Agenda 2063. There is others that, in fact, if you ask most Africans, they will not, if they want to be frank, they will tell you, we don't know what the AU does. Unless you are part of groups like this, in development, you will familiarize. So I think for agenda, we don't need to continue to make the same mistakes. For Agenda 2063 to roll out, I think the AU and these agencies might take a responsibility. It will cost some money. Is that correct? I don't think it will be difficult to develop TV programs. Is that correct? And syndicate it through the African media system and host talk shows. Okay, it will be popularized, but you must do it. It will not just happen, and we didn't do it. Okay, now for we in academia, it's easier. Through the AAU, it's easier because we are a constituency, and we have some agendas within that agenda, which we can easily associate ourselves with. Is that correct? It's not just, we're not looking at the totality of the agenda. But some of the crosses there are so important that we can mainstream it into our programs easy. We look at Agenda 2063. It said we need to develop, build and expand the African Knowledge Society through transformation and investment in universities, science, technology, research and innovation, through harmonization of education standard, mutual recognition of academic and professional qualifications, and so forth, and establish an African accreditation. These are some of the things we talked about yesterday. So some elements in Agenda 2063 are quite in consonant with the AAU agenda, what they are doing. All they need to do is to push it through the higher educational institutions, using some mechanisms, scholarships, debates, Vice Chancellor's Forum, please tell us what you are doing vis-a-vis Agenda. What can we do to help you? And by the way, Agenda 2063 is not a plan. It's a guidelines, but someone and aspirations. I think it is doable. As for the nation states, if you believe an African government is going to roll out Agenda 2063 campaign to advance, I don't think it's going to happen. They have so many priorities on their head, and they cannot see how this one will bring them votes. So that is not something we'll be working on.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's go deeper into the aspirations. We have
sorry.
7.
Before we move on to the aspirations.
Okay.
Yes, I just want to take it while it is fresh that we haven't been able to disseminate this document because of resources. For me, we said 2013, that's when it was launched. But we are talking of the technology age. And we are saying that we have organizations like UNESCO, sometimes European Union Commission and World Bank, whom we are looking at to donate to us so that we can do these things. To me, it's also partly a weakness. I'm not labeling anybody, but I find it as a drawback that each time we have something of our own, we are thinking of who can finance us. But the way I see the structures from the African Union Commission, considering that it's the ministers of higher education who are involved from the 54 African countries, I think once they go there, they've already come to national level. They've got permanent secretaries. They've got programs. They've got their terms of reference, which they should achieve within a year or so. So why are they not infusing this to be part of what they need to achieve? Okay. I think there are less expensive ways, some of which you don't need to pay anything in order to disseminate this information.
Okay. Absolutely, you are right. But let's, thank you so much, Doc. Let's move to the 7 aspirations. And we want everybody in this room to be a good ambassador of the Agenda 2063. And if they will be good ambassadors, then it means that they understand everything that is in there. So we want to look at the first one, which talks about the fact that we should have a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. That is the first aspiration. A prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. Now I want to ask you, Mr. Awaah, what role do you think higher education can play in ensuring that by the next 50 years, we have a continent that is prosperous and then our development is sustainable and is inclusive in nature?
All right. Sustainable development would largely be hinged on the caliber of human resources that African higher education practitioners would churn out of our institutions of higher learning. We must be able to churn out students or graduates who have the skill, knowledge, and attitude needed to take care of the issues around the African environment. Now, I want to give a short example from Crawford University. I was privileged to go for an exchange program at Crawford University in Nigeria. Now, in my university, I lecture entrepreneurship, University of Professional Studies, Accra. But when I went to Crawford University, I realized that the mode of teaching entrepreneurship was vastly different from what I do at the University of Professional Studies. Every student who studies entrepreneurship has a physical entrepreneurial project. You are either into shoemaking, you are either into clothing designing, you are either into music. There is something that they identify together with the lecturer or a team. They get to understand your strengths, your entrepreneurial strengths. Then you then agree that this, some had farms in Igbesa, Ogun State, Nigeria. That is the kind of sustainable development we're talking about. So that this student gets out of the university, he's not looking for jobs from the government. Now, he employs himself, okay, And secondly, he employs others. That is sustainable. Now, remember that entrepreneurship is not only supposed to be taught academically. Even as he goes out and he comes out with an organization, others become interns through that organization. They are able to empower themselves and then empower others. The question is, how does this become sustainable? They are in employment. They get money. They pay taxes to government. Hitherto, the issues, the vices that are related with unemployment, they are out of it. So crime also goes what? Down. So sustainable development, if we as practitioners of higher education can contribute, then one, we'll have to relook at our curriculum design. Training that offers the African graduate skill, knowledge, and attitude needed to be able to what? Make use of his environment towards empowering Africa. So if you are studying medicine in Africa, there are a lot of neem trees all over you. When we were young, neem tree, our mothers who were illiterates could use it to treat what? Malaria. Yes. So how does the African student studying medicine gets to identify that neem tree has what? Some components or materials that can cure malaria? And how do you modernize this so that we don't import malaria medicines from elsewhere? Okay. Are you getting it? Sure. So curriculum design is extremely important when we're talking about sustainability in Africa's higher education, and also fusing that to the issue of Agenda 2063. Maybe this would be my initial comments.
Okay, we'll take the comment of Professor Siham. What do you make of the first aspiration?
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Maybe I go back a little bit for the last point. I cannot imagine that every strategic plan or every agenda can be implemented from one side. So we have to put effort together. Government, civil society, higher education, and NGOs, and all of these partners, and even private sectors. Very important. So when speaking about resources and so on, we have to put in mind that we have to put all the effort together so as to implement such plans or such strategic plans.
Okay, thank you very much.
For the last point, to get sustainability, nowadays I go back always to the higher education institutions. Every university is a community-oriented university. That means when we design a curriculum, we have to look inside the society and we have to design our curriculum. So at this term, we can design a curriculum that focus on the problem based of the society. To have the sustainability, also I go again to the collaboration efforts. For example, to have sustainable in development, we need continuous capacity building, we need continuous information, because knowledge is a dynamic process. Even for those who graduate from the universities, they need to have knowledge every now and then. So we need capacity building, we need knowledge to be renewed for the candidates, and this need resources, and now the other partners should be there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know our participants have a lot of questions and contributions to make, and so would want to go straight to the point so that we can open the floor for them as well. So the strategy I'm going to develop is that we have 7. I'll give each one to our panel members. So, for example, we're moving to the second aspiration, which is going directly to Professor Dzidonu. And the second aspiration talks about the fact that we must have an integrated continent, politically united, and based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's renaissance. Very loaded. And so, Prof, what do you make of this second aspiration, and what role can higher education play in making it a reality?
Well, I think this aspiration is an old aspiration.
Exactly.
Starting back at the foundation of the Organization of African Unity itself. That's the aspiration which have been eluded us for quite a long, long time. A peaceful Africa, prosperous Africa, united, okay? So I think it's just something that they brought into the Agenda 2060 as matters arising. That is something we will be working towards. Of course, yes. If you don't have a prosperous nation, okay, you are prosperous, that means your people are reasonably well fed and their health is taken care of, education is paid for, you are bound to get dissatisfied people. When you get dissatisfied people, we all know what happened on the continent. So certainly, education can play a role there. As much as education will provide the necessary human resources for developing the economy, I think if our economies are well developed, it's likely to reduce tensions. Is that correct? Because some of the conflicts on the continent is about competition for resources, competition for land. Is that correct? Competition for territories, okay? Competition for jobs. Is that correct? If we have Europe, they are reasonably well off. Is that correct? So you don't see those kind of competitions for things. Look at most of the wars. So I think if we manage to develop our educational sector, produce the human resources which are the main ingredient for development in an information society. There's no other ingredient. There's none, not now. It's the human resources which are needed to develop the knowledge economy, the knowledge society. If we can at least, and the people you need to do that is human beings. And we have a lot of it. Is that correct? Sure. And if you can put our act together, the higher education, nobody advertised a job there and said that qualification, senior high school. No. You must get proper education. Is that correct? Proper and relevant education. The relevant is extremely important. I think you are aware, recently the World Bank put up statistics. Exactly. That 56% of Ghanaians who are being trained now will not be relevant for the economy in 18 years' time. I was on the radio yesterday, somebody called and said, does it mean that 56% of Ghanaians will be damn useless? The World Bank doesn't know what it's talking about. And they said they didn't say they will be useless. They will not be relevant because they got what? Yesterday's skills. That's another thing for higher education. We must see whether we are training people for the future job market, whether as going to be employed or employable or creating jobs. Those are extremely important. I don't want to stretch the argument. I think if you get our higher education right, training our youth in relevant skills, that will develop the economy. I think that prosperous Africa we're talking about is achievable. It's achievable. The peaceful Africa you're talking about is achievable. The integrated Africa you're talking about is achievable. Okay, that's quite clear. Thank you very much, Prof. Dr. Makuku, we want to go to the third aspiration, and that one goes to you. How can higher education ensure that we have an Africa of good governance, which is very important, where we respect democracy and then also human rights, and then we also play key emphasis on the rule of law? How do we ensure that our higher education is able to make us achieve this vision? Thank you.
Sorry, Kwesi. Thank you for the question, but allow me please to refer back to number one, because there are some pertinent issues which I think I want to shortly. Okay, that's fine. When you look at prosperous Africa and sustainable development, I just want to say that from what we have said, maybe this time around we need to change our attitudes and do things differently. That's very key. We need to review ourselves and check ourselves, monitor and evaluate ourselves to say, how have we been doing things? How can we do things differently for the better? I think if we don't ask such pertinent questions and we continue to say we want to move on, I don't see us moving. So in other words, I want to say we have the 17 SDGs, for example. If I take higher education, most of the universities do have different faculties. And I would say for the different faculties, if we are talking of gender, if we are talking of food security, we take it to the Faculty of Agriculture. We take gender to the social sciences. So the excuse that institutions themselves can't contribute small when they are doing it within the faculties, again, it links with what I would need to address in number 3. When it is being done in the faculties by students and lecturers, it means we are inculcating these values in them. Secondly, we are passing on the message that it can be done. So when they go out, they are passing on these values, and it goes on like that. Allow me also to say this key point that Professor Dzidonu said relevant. The other thing is that we need to do relevant research. And this relevant research needs to be linked with industry, because the issue of silos, it will not work. If I check in this document, page 1, page 4, page 5, page 6, the word integration is repeated more than once. So it is the key word that we need to work with in order to achieve that. And then community engagement. Universities have been labeled, some of them, as ivory towers. That you have a faculty of agriculture and environmental science, but the community there, they are not making use of the land. You are not just passing by, going to your home to do a bit of community engagement with those people. Unless higher education also gets into the community and shows that it can actually transform the communities around them, then I'm not sure how we become also relevant to helping our communities realize the SDGs.
All right. Thank you very much. On that note, I'll pass your question to Mr. Awaah. Since you elaborated the aspiration 1, where we want an Africa that is of good governance, we are very democratic in nature, and we respect human rights, justice, and the rule of law.
Okay. The underlying principles of governance are very clear. Transparency, being efficient and effective, being democratic, opening up, that is listening to other stakeholders. And if we want to translate this in the higher educational arena, then it would therefore mean that higher education practitioners must ensure good governance within their immediate environs. That is the university environment. Now, it is important for us to note that according to the AU itself, over 65% of Africa's population is made up of what? The youth. And that is the largest strata of Africa's population. A majority of these are found on African university campuses. So if governance is supposed to be efficient and transparent and representative, it therefore would imply that even in the governance structures of African universities, 1, to reduce conflict, okay, there is the need for student representation in the governance structures. Absolutely. A lot of higher education practitioners do not want to hear this, but it's important that we start seeing it as such, because the truth is that students outweigh other faculty. When you get into a university environment, over 80% of persons on campuses are students. So that if decisions are going to be made for students, then they should be involved. It is the only way that there will be minimal demonstrations and strikes and unrest on African university campuses. Now, if governance at the university level is fine, then it will transcend into any other level of national life, because students learn from the universities. And if the tenets of democracy, transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness are imbibed in them whilst they are on university campuses as a product of the training of higher education, when they go out, then there surely would be good governance in African, every sphere of the African life. Now let me take an example from our country, Ghana. It looks to me Ghana is doing well in this direction. A lot of the academic boards in Ghanaian universities, you have student representative council sitting in there. So when you take decisions together with the students, the likelihood for them to turn against management is less, something from because they were part of the decision-making body. In instances where you don't involve students in making decisions, the riot rate usually is what? High, because they are ignorant of the intent of the decision management took. So it therefore tells them that if they do not riot, you may give them a decision that is not right. So in recent times, we haven't heard of strikes in Ghana, except for the recent one that came in at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, I would say it's a product of good governance at the tertiary level. Now, at the national level, the National Union of Ghana Students, for instance, is represented at the Ghana Educational Trust Fund, Ghana AIDS Commission, Student Loans Trust Fund, National Youth Council. So when students are represented at all of these decision-making stages at national higher educational schemes, what happens is that when decisions are made, they come and they explain to the larger board, which is the 65% that are down. So tensions are what? Minimal. Just compare Ghana and other countries where students are not represented on higher education or academic boards. You realize that in those jurisdictions, the level of tensions are higher. So what I'm saying in short is that to ensure governance or good governance, African higher educational institutions must let it be a reflection of them on the campuses by involving every stakeholder, representatives of teachers, representatives of workers, representatives of students, representatives of cleaners, so that when decisions are made, there is collective ownership. It is the beginning of making the AU Aspiration 3 a reality.
Thank you very much. Charity begins at home, and so it's very much important that whilst the students on campus, we expose them to the best practices of leadership. Absolutely. And we believe that will be part and parcel of them as they go on. Let me take you to Aspiration 4, unless you have something to add.
This is very important. You
go ahead.
I think it is a core value. For everything, we have to have a values. So this is what is stated here. If we belong into the higher education institution, it is a core value that tie our educational process. And if I just mention an example, for our university, we have a strategic plan. This strategic plan, it is inserted in the curriculum from the first semester for every student. And they state all the objectives of the plan, all the details. And in the middle, state the core value towards the community, towards the students, and towards the staff. And in this value, we have this respect, we have this democracy, we have this object. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because of our time, some of the aspirations are interrelated. So let me read out, we'll discuss the 4, which talks about a peaceful and secure Africa. And when I went through the strategies, one of the things that really struck my mind was the fact that by 2020, all guns must be silent in Africa. By 2020, we are just in 2018. 2018 has already ended. We have just a few years to 2020. And all guns must be silent in Africa. That is one of the strategies. So we have a lot of people say that they have not heard of the strategy. Then I doubt when that should be done. But let's look at the 5th one. The 5th one I'm just reading because it ties up with the 2nd one, which talks about the fact that we should have an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, shared values and ethics, which Professor Dzidonu touched on. But the 6th one is very important, which I know Dr. Makuku and Professor Siham would be interested in. An Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential of the African people, especially its women and youth, which is very important. And then also caring for the children, because these are the 3 indicators which are very important if we want to achieve the African goal. Let me start with you, Professor Siham.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. When speaking about women, almost you mentioned the equality in education. Yeah. And I think most of the African countries now, they are moving towards, we are in the same wave, moving towards that to offer the opportunity for women so as to have the similar chance for in education. But for me, this gives other sense. Either women or men, we have also to concern about the capacity building. Because even for the women, if we give the women the chances, and without this knowledge, without this capacity building, this will not give sense. For us in Sudan, women now, it is 60% in the higher education, 60 to 65% compared to the male.
The men.
Now, yeah. And for me, I think women or men, we have to look for the quality. We have to look for the capabilities of the human being. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Makuku, let me take your view on this, and then Professor Dzidonu and Mr. Awaah will take the 7th, and then we go to our audience. Women, children, youth.
Thank you very much, Kwesi.
Doc, I know that is your passion and interest, so I will have to restrict you here. You have only 1 minute to make that.
Thank you. I know Kwesi knows I'm very passionate about this one, but what I would say is that let the higher education ground be where things happen. We don't say we want to, let's have this department on gender issues and what, and let's have support of the children and the youth. But to begin with, when you check in the higher education institutions, are the people walking the talk? That's my key question. If we say one thing and we do something else which is different from what we are saying, will we ever achieve this? So you find that especially the issue of women, mostly suppose it's a function or what, women are just pulled there to come and do some window dressing. No, that's not what we want. We want to be involved in decision making. Not that you see this, there's an imbalance, and outsiders, what will they say about us? We have what we call the African Quality Rating Mechanism tool. I like that tool. It's an institutional enhancement and improvement tool that we are going to share with you. Under governance, what you get scored for is also the balance of governance by gender. What is there in the management for the deans, for the chairpersons? And when we go to institutions, we particularly look at how much effort are institutions making to make sure the girl child, the number of the girl children is what is increasing in the institutions. So we need to have practical things that we do in the institutions to make it happen. Okay. And when you look at the other dimension, which I really want to emphasize, is that when you go by our theme, we are looking at the youth. And so I continue to reiterate that we should give them room to demonstrate what they can do, because there's a generation gap. With that generation gap, what are we being told? I always want to congratulate my Secretary General in front of everyone that he wants to continue behaving like the current youth, because we communicate with him on WhatsApp. He doesn't feel insulted. That's the best way he wants it. But for some, you would find in the institution, lecturers say, you insulted me to a student because you used this model. So there's this generation gap, but it's us, the adults. Okay. If we don't want to have friction with the students and with the young staff in the universities so that it gets into the society, we need to accept that they are the Y.com generation. Other than fighting with them, let's convert that and make use of it as an added advantage. And we then come into the ICT age together with the youth, and we are moving, we are mentoring them, we are grooming them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Makuku. Yes, I think I have to pause you here at this moment because you may go on and on. Thank you so much for the knowledge you're sharing. We want to take the last aspiration, which is very important, and then Professor Dzidonu and Mr. Awaah will tackle that for us. And one man I always refer to when I'm talking about the last aspiration is Professor Patrice Lumumba, who says that Africa is on the dinner table and we are being, I don't know, chopped or eaten by people depending on wherever they come from. We want to have an Africa that is strong, united, influential global player and partner. An Africa where we are global players and then we are partners and not to be used. How do we get there, and what must higher education institutions do to ensure that we get to a point where we have something to offer at the global level? Prof?
Good. I've already said that higher education, the knowledge workforce is the key determinant for economic development in the information age. And higher education is the key producer of that knowledge. So the link is quite clear there. Now, as to the issue of having an African, which is what? Can we have those words again? Strong?
Strong,
yes.
United,
yes.
Influential global player,
very good.
And partner.
Now, in this world, to be influential as a country, you must have one of these two things. Either you have bread, or you have gun, or you have both. Bread, or gun, or both. You can be a superpower if you're economically big time, like the US and then China. You could also be a superpower if you have a lot of guns, like the US. There's no other parameter. Now, if Africa wants to be taken serious, you must have a lot of bread. Probably we forget about a gun for the meantime. A lot of bread, which means you must have a viable economy. You don't go to, you cannot be strong if you go begging. It's as simple as that. So the aspiration of the Agenda 2063 is to have a prosperous Africa. A prosperous Africa means that we will have a situation where our economy is developed such that we can be a global player on the economic sphere, either in terms of trade, in terms of our GDP, and so forth and so forth. So that is very clear that we can achieve that. I'm pretty sure that if we achieve that, one thing I like about Africans is that they are very, very together. Probably we are together in misery. You see, you don't see two Africans quarreling about whether we are poor or not. They all agree that we are poor. Yes. We all agree. And that actually unites us. Probably I'm not sure whether when we all reach, we will be still united. So I'm not very much worried about the togetherness of Africans. Even in poverty, we are reasonably together, apart from few wars here and there. So I really think that what we need to focus on is the economic empowerment. If we get there, developing the right set of human resources, we want to compete. Look at the global world now. Which are the richest companies? They are producing knowledge, products, and services. Alibaba, during a single day, they have the order of over 30 billion in one day. It's knowledge, products, and services. They're not caterpillars. So the point I'm making is that we have the human resources, we can transform them, we can direct them in order to change our economy and get the bigger bread I'm talking about, and then we can no longer be taken seriously.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. Mr. Fred Awaah.
Well, I think that I would want to say what Prof has said in a different way. When you are deficient in a given thing, it's very obvious that you'll be vulnerable to one who is not deficient in that. So now taking that to a larger scale, if Africa lacks technology, it surely will be seeking technology from some other partners. If Africa lacks good education, Africa will be seeking good education from elsewhere. If economically Africa is not endowed, Africa would be seeking economic freedom elsewhere. Now, when you go seeking, then the issue of partnership doesn't come in. It looks like you are vulnerable, and then you'll pick up whatever comes your way. So if we want to cure ourselves from our states now to become partners, that means that there is the need for us to empower ourselves in every sphere of the African's life. Meaning that education-wise, students of Africa should be confident in our educational system, in that they do not want to what? Seek second or third class universities abroad. As we sit today, some of the universities that are in Ghana are better than some universities in Ukraine. But of course, an average African student, when you give him the alternatives of going to Ukraine or remaining in Ghana, just because of a scholarship, he will run to what? Ukraine. That doesn't bring partnership, it's beggarship. Do you understand? So to cure ourselves from all of these, we need to empower ourselves, and higher education actually is the solution. Higher education is the solution in that if we have appropriate training models and the mind of the African changes from the university or from the school, then it affects positively every sphere of the African life. But if we have African training that is filled with plagiarism, sex for marks, okay, you have cheating in examinations, then obviously it would make our educational system a little less than what pertains outside. I'm not saying that some universities in, abroad do not also go through this, but the rate at which it's happening in Africa seems a bit alarming. Now, fortunately, in Ghana today, we have organizations like Well Ghana that are trying to come out with models, technological models that can curb the issue of cheating in examinations. So, long and short of it is this. We can be partners, we can be global partners, we can be world players, we can be whatever we want to be. But it starts with us. Higher education, because that is our area. If we train our students well and they come out well, they'll be good in leading the country. That is governance. They are going to be good politicians who do not go into governance because they want to steal funds, but they will go into governance because they want to make the life of the ordinary African better. We would have medical practitioners who did not copy to get their certificates. So people who go to the hospital will not fear that their life may be at stake because the trainees were not properly what? Trained. Okay. We would have students who get out of African universities and will not queue and form graduate unemployed association. Are we together? Yeah. They would go out and be employed by themselves and also recruit others to reduce the burden that is already existing on government. So
definitely Graduate Employers Association.
Absolutely. Okay. And indeed, it is important also to inform that they will pay taxes.
Okay.
Are we together? And then individual African countries would be liberated. In that manner, ladies and gentlemen, when we are meeting other stakeholders, we can say we are partners. I am fed up of the African discussions where we come and sit and pretend everything is all right. It is not all right, and we must say it as it is, to know that we are sick. There is some level of injury done to us by other colonial powers or ourselves. That must be established. And if we have this at the back of our minds, then we must find curative measures. The curative measures are those outlined by the African Union. But documents do not come into fruition without the actions of men. So all of us must own the Agenda 2063, look at where our responsibilities lie, then we'll work towards achieving them. African Union is not that building at Addis Ababa. African Union is Professor Ehile, it's Fred Awaah, it is Sami, it is the president of AIT, it is the worker from Wells International. So when we say African Union, it is not far from us. It is us. So in our individual role, Department of Business Administration, I must play my role well. You work at AAU, you must play your role well. You are a student, you must study to prove yourself worthy of your course. That is what the aspirations of the Agenda 2063 stand for. Having said this,
Thank you so much. Okay, finally land.
All right, I want to say this. Now, when you look at the Agenda 2063, I established earlier that over 65% of the population of Africa are youthful. Source is the African Union. In Africa, there is a tendency of always talking about youth participation, but there is the need for us to exit from that issue of youth participation. The current trend is youth engagement. You understand? There is a dichotomy between the two. Youth participation is what you invite youth to come and sit in this program. But what went into organizing this program, youth should have been involved so that they can own it. So you must engage youth and not only what? Let them be participants. When you bring youth as participants, what happens is that they don't own the project or the program. I'll give you an example. Agenda 2063, we say 65% of the continent is made up of youth. As at the time this policy document was being established for the continent of Africa, I was leading all of the students of the continent. Let me establish here and now that in all of the processes and discussions leading to the establishment of the Agenda 2063, my organization, the All African Students Union, which is supposed to be the representative body of all of the students of the continent, were not what? Represented. But at the launch, we were invited. So I showed up, spoke on behalf of the student of the continent at the time that I'm seeing the document for the first time. So you realize that that document, there is no feeling of belongingness. Okay, so politically, a youthful face is shown to say that there is youth participation. I want to also establish this. With CESA, Continental Education Strategy for Africa, I just heard that the African Union has mandated the Association of African Universities to take care of its implementation. Now, in that
the higher education.
Higher education. Cluster, yeah. In that same document, Agenda 2063, the African Union has enshrined that there should be establishment of African youth clubs or campus clubs. Sure. Now, why will they not empower the All African Students Union to take care of that? Because the All African Students Union is the mother body of all what? Students on the face of the continent. They already have their structures through the guild presidents or the student representative councils. So if you have one policy that is largely hinged to benefit the youth, this agenda would benefit the youth than any other group of persons here, because it is to come in the next 50 years, now 45 years, because some years are already gone. So that if you say there should be establishment of African campus clubs, there is imperative on the African Union to empower. You may not need to give the All African Students Union money, no. You may have to write a letter to partner with them, so that when they go to the Ethiopian airline and say, we are going to universities in Ethiopia to establish African campus clubs, the Ethiopian embassy can say, okay, we are giving you 10 tickets because you have some mandate from what? The African Union. Are you getting it?
All right.
It is not funds that move everything.
Thank you so much, Mr. Awaah. If I give you the opportunity, I know this is your passion as well. Let me put a full stop here. We'll come back to you. Right. Thank you. Let me come back to my wonderful audience. I know a lot of us have wonderful contributions, comments, and questions. May I see by hand? Yes, I knew. Thank you so much. Can you coordinate it for me? One.
Yeah, strategy.
Yes.
That is true.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and a great thanks to the panelists. Okay, my name is Godsui from University of Professional Studies. Okay, I want to say that growing up, I've observed something talking about Ghana. You know, all the things we are talking about now actually boils down to development. And once the Agenda 2063 is implemented, or the guidelines that it has stated are adhered to, it is going to lead us to the development that we want to. But I realize that, unfortunately, our nations or our countries are being led by, I don't know which word to really put it, but politicization of the things that goes on in the nation. Like, for instance, I observed that in Ghana, there are a lot of projects that are being started by many governments which are not being completed. And as a result, the development we want to see in Ghana is not coming on. So every government comes and then brings his own initiative, his own agenda, leaving all other stakeholders that are the main benefactors of his or her campaign. So it boils down that we don't see the things that we actually talk about when we meet or when programs are being organized, and in fact big people come, we say everything, and then at the end it just ends there. We don't see anything being done about it. So talking about the awareness creation regarding the Agenda 2063, which myself too, the first time hearing about it, I think when these things are being made, like Dr. Fred said, the engagement of the youths, those that will be the key players in achieving the goals of the plans, since they are not being engaged, we don't know about them. And as a result, there is a centralization of the objectives and then the plans that are being outlined at just some levels. And then once that is done, they are not being decentralized to the various leaders, like we're talking about the student representative councils up to the All African Union leadership level. Since these things are not being done, we don't get to know about them. And even nowadays, talking about the technology which is taking over, we have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have all these things. And once these programs or these initiatives are being programmed or are being bring up, which is something that will bring development into Africa, we actually have to use some of these channels so that everyone gets to know about it, and we bring our contributions on board, and together we achieve our goal. Thank you very much.
So yours is actually a contribution, but not a question. Please, let's be precise and concise when you get the microphone. If yours is a question, go straight to the point so that we can make good use of time. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm Owusu from University of Professional Studies. My problem is the awareness of the Agenda 2063. Fortunately for me, I'm ahead of it, I think last year or so. And I just got to realize that this thing was propounded or brought into being 2013. And for 5 good years, it is, sorry, it is so sad. You see, we can do this so simple. When our politicians are campaigning for power, they go to every corner of the country to get their messages to their people. Why can't we do the same? National Commission for Civic Education. I ask myself every day. Last time I had the opportunity to meet them, the vice president, and I told her that they have failed us. And it is true, they are not doing anything. This Agenda 2063, after reading it, I see it to be something very good. But the truth is, we've not heard of it. We don't even know what it is. Okay, if the whole continent, if everybody, both educated and uneducated, knows about this, it is explained very well to even, to the grassroots. I think we can do so much with this. Thank you very much.
Professor Faiza?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's just a clarification and comment. I think regarding the declaration, conventions, and agendas, all these issues come up as a product from a long process involving all concerned policy makers from member countries according to the signed strategies between the Organization of African Association of African Unity and the member countries. If there is a gap or a defect or a problem for disseminations, I think it come up from representative country person from different countries. So my recommendations for each policymaker involved in each declarations or agenda or conventions regarding the implementation of things related to African development need to have a system for disseminations and a system for clarifications and dissemination of information about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next. Then your hand was up. After the microphone should go to the professor there, then our students will get the chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator, for the opportunity. I'm Abraham Ameni from the University of Development Studies. I want to take it from where Mr. Awaah was. You see, Africa behave as if we have an alternative. 65%, as he said, of our population are below the age of 25. 53% of that falls between the ages of 16 to 6 years, are out of school. They are roaming our streets. But when our leaders get out there to formulate policies that is supposed to affect the lives of these people, they are not considered. Professor Frimpong Boateng said in one of his articles he published, he said, until Africa become a prize giver and not a prize taker, we are not going to move anywhere. Population has a heady momentum. Right now, if each and every one in this room were giving birth to 4 and they decide to give birth to 1, the population will still increase. What are we doing about that? And the academia cannot be left off the hook. they have played a part in where Africa is today. Let me use Ghana as an example. We are in a country where they stood up one day, and before we realized, we heard that you cannot have D in your WASSCE results and enter the university. Now the issue is this. I am going to read a course that has nothing to do with mathematics, and I have a D in mathematics. You tell me that I cannot enter the university. You have killed my dreams. Right there. And we need an Africa that will be giving the relevant and what? The most quality education. Do we want an Africa where our baseline for our education is high school? Then let's establish that fact. If not, let us start reconsidering some of our decisions that will affect people in the next 50 years. Let us not forget, 50 years from now, most of us who are taking these decisions will not be alive.
Sure.
No, if we want it or no, Marcus Aurelius said that the only thing that a man is sure about is death, nothing else. We will die, you will go, and the youth will take over. Africa can never achieve the issue of peace. Why wouldn't they achieve it? You are in a continent where we don't have equitable distribution of our resources. The top 5% of the population of Africa own virtually every resources in Africa, while the 95% of what is left are languishing in poverty. What are we doing about that? What is the academia doing about this to push the agenda of the youth so that this situation will change?
Thank you very much. The microphone should go to Prof.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad I've been given an opportunity. I came in late. I apologize, but I listened attentively to the speakers. One thing I want to make clear to those of us who are being referred to or who refer to themselves as youth today. Youth is not it's not a fixed thing. In the next few years, you will be across, and another set of people will be talking about you. I remember 1994, I led a group as a youth. And today, when I appear, people say I am old. I feel bad about it, you know, because within me, what I think should be achieved, not much is achieved. And that spirit is still in me. But people say I'm old, you know. So what I want to make known to you, all of us here, is that development is not a free gift of nature. Nature does not give development. Neither would you expect man to give development to man. What is fundamental, specifically to the youth, is for there to be a kind of aggregated focus. Because what I have seen over these years is that individuals come together as youth. By the time they have a handshake with the so-called elite, their individual lives become transformed, and they're over there as leaders, irrespective of their age. These other people will still be agitating, but the people, some of them there are really not too old. So what I want to put in your hands is this. If we must move forward as Africa, we must, you know, do a kind of aggregation of our development goals. What do we want? Let me tell you one thing, which I have made up my mind. I don't care. I run organizations. And if I get my own personal money, I fund the organizational programs. And I ensure that all the media houses are present. What I have made up my mind to do is play your part. Let the world hear you. You may succeed in bringing people together, but even when that is not done, my mark ought to have been made. So what I want to say, no man gives the other development. Money could be given to you, but indeed, the welfare of this group called youth will only be achieved if they agree, if they come together, you know, advance. Government is no man, no individual's affair. I keep telling, I don't care who is president, I don't care who is vice president, I care about my country. I am a citizen of my country, and I have my rights. So that which my rights, you know, seem to have put in my hands, I pursue. So what I want to say, which I have said, I want to repeat it, that no institution gives development. One other thing before I drop the microphone. We must know this, that tertiary education is just like the refinery. You know, once you miss it at the refinery, at the refining level, there is a problem. You know, so when we have this idea that education certificate, unquote, once you get it, your life is changed, is a colonial mentality. What we need is knowledge. Knowledge is an empowerment that, you know, makes a man, gives man the power to confront his environment and change his environment. So it doesn't matter whether it is first degree, second. I have 7 degrees, and I've pushed them beside, you know, push them behind me, knowing fully whether what is required of me is action. So what I want to tell you, if you are in the university already, let me make it known to you that the purpose of the entire thing called tertiary education is just to refine your mind. Once the mind is appropriately refined, what comes out of it can change the world. But the way Africa is going, I feel frustrated. You know, I look at it, even the people who are here today, by the time they're over there, you now begin to wonder, could this be something beyond, you know? So my conclusion is that, my beloved Africans, I am not happy with the lingering process of development in Africa, irrespective of the fact that we have all it takes to actually leap over. So let us put ourselves together. I am so glad to hear I don't know his name. I feel so in love with that man, the voice, the opinions. So this kind of man can really put young people together. Drive. If there is no demand you make on government, government can be changed. There is no demand you make on government if you are well organized, that you can't get. That is what I know. But the problem is that immediately you put yourself together, people begin to define you, tell you, you are from this, like I'm from Nigeria. Immediately they see you pushing for something that is positive. They tell you you are an Igbo man. And immediately the psyche of even those with you will be changed. And that's a fundamental problem. So let us see what we could do before we go. The man says 50. 50 is too much. I graduated 1994, and I thought I was a young man, and now, look at me. So please, right now, whatsoever you can do, my beloved friend, do it. Write it, and let anytime, any day we stop, our documents and generation coming will speak for us.
Thank you very much.
That is it. Okay,
thank you very much, sir. Let's go to the student. Yes. Please be very precise. The lady first. Yes.
I'm Patricia Acquah, a research assistant at the Encyclopedia Africana. On aspiration 5, Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. I realized that we kind of brushed over it, and then it's a common apathy we have. Africa's history had already been written for us by foreigners who wrote our history, and I think it's about time that we wrote our own stories, and then we give particular attention to culture. But here is the case that universities playing their part in achieving these aspirations. I realize that universities have a strategy or an agenda of pushing from culture, humanity, social science. You look at their strategic plans and it looks like there's a general consensus where all universities in Africa are moving from that side to other side. I don't know whether it's from donor stipulations or something. So how would the universities help the AAU to achieve this aspiration, since they seem to have another agenda of their own?
Thank you very much. Let it come here, and then finally.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mashoud Abdelhakim from University of Professional Studies. And my question is that, how can Africa develop? For instance, we Africans, we normally import foreign medicines from different continents. And we Africans, how we can develop is that we should use the trees around in order to use it for the medicine that can cure malaria and other things, as said earlier on. So this is the contribution that I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The last one.
My name is Ajemono Shodako. I'm an MBA student in the University of Professors Accra. I want to ask a question to my distinguished panelists. and it's about the role of everyone in this room. We can leave here understanding what the Agenda 2063 is, how much pressure it is to the growth of our continent, but we may not understand the role of each and every one in the house. What is my role as the MBA student? What is the role of the undergrad student? What is the role of the university? It's a very big community. We have many people playing the roles in there. What can we do? I remember when I was doing my undergrad, I wrote an essay on the Sustainable Development Goals, all of them, and I was scored marks on them. But I have never written any essay on the Agenda 2063. I don't even know how I can even write one. But if it can be integrated in our academic structure where it can be examinable, it can be made our anthem as the African society, maybe we can believe that this aspiration could be met. So the question is, what is the role of each individual in this room as we speak? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Shall we put our hands together for our audience and put our hands together for yourself? These have been wonderful contributions from the audience. We want to take our last remarks, and then I think all of them were contributions. There wasn't a single question asked. I thought the last presentation was a question, but also kind of a contribution. But in our summaries, I would want you to tackle some of the things that we've heard so that we'll be able to make time. I will start with Dr. Makuku.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Linking up with the last contribution, we are saying that as AAU, we are almost through with the process of putting Agenda 2063 as an online course, because we have realized that even the vice chancellors who are leading the universities, who are supposed to be guided by this document, most of them do not know about it. But it's all higher education community. Anybody who wants can take up the online course. Secondly, I just wanted to say, I'm not sure how we can also make sure that our governments are behind where we need some commitment, financial or otherwise, to bring our resources together. Like the idea of the PASET, that they agreed as countries that each country would put like 2 million, because the issue of human resource and good brains has been emphasized. So it's that push which also needs to be done, so that instead of having people getting scholarships to other countries, we have had it. We now have that fund, central fund in Africa, where we increase intra-Africa mobility of students going from one institution to another. If you consider like a country like Egypt, they've got more equipment in medicine and what. So with harmonization, students can go there to do medicine. Here to the south, we have a problem of equipment, because that's the other issue, that everything we have is almost theory at the expense of practical because of lack of equipment. Just to wind off, I just wanted also to say, in most cases, people ask, what have you done? And it also goes along with the comments. What have you done? Who? What are you also supposed to do? So we can ask the question, what can I do to make a contribution? And that's very, very important. You remember when we had the webinars, we were saying people need to make contributions. So that is what I had to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Violet Makuku. And she is a quality assurance expert here at the Association of African Universities. Shall we take your view and your final comments, Professor Dzidonu?
Yes, basically I think we said quite a lot of things on the Agenda 2063. I was reflecting exactly how do we go forward. The AU doesn't have a big communication department. They don't think they have to. So what they do is what they've done. So, and expect the member states to communicate. And the member states don't also do that. So we got Agenda 2063 down there, and with no dissemination. It's not going to change after this meeting. But what I can say is, I see in life, you try to do what you can do, not what you cannot do. So our constituency is AAU, and we have our own constituency as higher education. Let's see what we can do in promoting. We are lucky that we have a continental body, which is the Association of African Universities, which have also been given a mandate to push the higher education component of the agenda. I think the onus is now on the AAU to find a way to see how we can streamline this, mainstream this into our operations. Now, as for the students, I think every student must ask themselves, the future is yours. And Agenda 2063 said we must have a developed Africa. And we always said that human resource is key to develop Africa. What can you do personally in order to achieve that goal? You get good education. You get relevant skills. Is that correct? That is your individual contribution. Sure. You don't need anybody to tell you to do that. Eh? You are saying, what do you do, what do you do? Get good education, relevant education, and you'll be contributing to that. But I will leave it to the AAU to see how we can move on. But I'm very sure, I'm very convinced that, you see, if somebody is ahead of you, it means he knows something you don't know. The rest of the world are ahead of us. They know something we don't know. Agenda 2063 is our beginning to say that probably the thing we don't know, we think this is what we should be doing. But it must go beyond just a document, or else it will be like other African documents. But we have a chance as higher education to move this, at least in a little bit that we can do. I think AAU should play the leading role on that.
Thank you very much, Professor Dzidonu. We would take the final comment from Mr. Fedawa.
Well, in concluding, I would want to touch on Aspiration 5, the issue of a strong cultural identity, common heritage, shared values, and ethics. Unfortunately, the lady who asked about the question stepped out, and we also did not talk about it as panelists. I think practitioners of higher education can facilitate this, and I want to say that the Association of African Universities is already doing that. The academic staff exchanges fall under this. Now I go to Zimbabwe, where you are from. Then I eat sadza. Then I realize that we also have sadza right here in Ghana. So we share something culturally. Madam, I come to Sudan. I eat asida and shai nana. We also have that in the Upper East region of Ghana. We call it tuozafi. It's the same asida. So when I come to Sudan, I only need to know that there is something that connects us. You see, so staff exchanges. African universities must send their staff out. When you are home, you become a local champion. And you think you are knowledgeable and you think you know everything. But it's not so. When you are taken to other parts of Africa, and AAU is already doing that. Annually, they send people, academic staff. Sometimes the funds, they send it back because African staff are not applying. So I think AAU has started, and individual universities, vice chancellors, send your academic staff out of your comfort zone. When you do that, you'll be fulfilling Agenda 5, Aspiration 5 of the Agenda 2063. Now, my good friend from the MBA class also asked, what are the roles of students? It is not far-fetched. In your university, start a campus club, AU campus club, because that is what the strategic document says, that we should have what? Clubs, African student and youth clubs on every African what? Campus. They haven't said who should do it. For as long as you are an African student, you can take it as an initiative. 1, to disseminate information about the African Union. 2, to let your colleagues know about the Agenda 2063. And 3, see those that you can implement as prescribed in the document that are within your powers. And when you do that, and your colleague at the University of Botswana does that, another does that at the University of Pretoria, then you will be what? Implementing the concept paper of the African Union. Are we together? So we all have roles. There is no excuse. We are an integral part of the African Union. And if vice chancellors can also say that in our universities, every student organization or the main student organization should take the African AU Campus Club as a responsibility. You may have a number of failure rates, but at least a number of your SRCs would work with it. And in doing that, we are fulfilling the Agenda 2063.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fred Awaah. We'll go to Professor Siham, and she'll give us a final
Thank
word.
you very much. For me, I will insist on the way forward. Way forward under the umbrella of AAU. So building multiple or bilateral relationship, multiple relationship between the African institutions and set the priorities, and let us start to go forward. Only one comment about the management for the natural resources in Africa. I think we have to revise our programs concerning management sciences in our universities, because I think the problem is in the how we can manage our resources, and we have to revise our natural resources so we cannot need external support or donors from outside, and or we can implement our research, our own research, and we can lead that for innovation for these youth, young people sitting here, and we have to do our own. So we have to start by this collaboration, by this mutual and multiple relationship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's put our hands together for our panelists. I would want to share with you briefly what the Association of African Universities has been doing. And just as Dr. Makuku said, Agenda 2063 is a passion of the association. And so we have a TV program that is specifically dedicated to Agenda 2063, where we are just kind of throwing light to each and every aspiration. I think Professor Dzidonu has been a resource person on the panel. We also operate via, we use the virtual means as well. So you may not necessarily have to be in the studio, wherever you are on the continent and you want to be part of the panelists discussing the Agenda 2063. You may be in Ghana, but not in Accra. Just let us know. Together, we will be able to disseminate the agenda and let everyone know. Let me also put across that, you know, a lot of frameworks have been developed on Agenda 2063. There is a communication framework, and also there is a resource mobilization framework on Agenda 2063. And what we are doing as an association is sharing this information, and we put it across every single event that we organize, because we believe that if the Vice Chancellor of University A hears of it, he or she is able to champion it wherever he's coming from. Number two, in as much as we cite the SDGs, let us also cite Agenda 2063. One thing that you may think a lot of the African countries or a lot of the countries are doing well with the SDGs. Trust me, they are doing the very things that they know. But the UN and the stakeholders have researchers on the ground who are able to kind of gather or do surveys and align whatever is happening to the SDGs. So we must also start. When I come to your university and I want to do a survey now, I will find out that a lot of things that we are doing are already in line with the 7 aspirations, but we do not tie them. Going forward, if you are putting forth your proposals, if you are writing any academic document, let us look at which aspiration does this fall, and let us begin to map them. Then in some few years, we will be able to cite a lot of them and then make references to them as well. Lastly, thanks to the senior management of the Association of African Universities, they have given the young people the voice. And so what the AAU does, I think in the first panel, Professor Mbab made mention of that. We believe that if we want to achieve the Africa we want, then we need to tackle the young people of today. And so we have been organizing a series of young workshops for young people, student leaders, because we believe that the SRC president today automatically will be or may be the president of that country, or may play a key role. If we're able to get them at this onset and then make sure that they get hold of the 50-year development plan, when he becomes the board chairman of an institution, when he becomes the president of a country, he already knows what he or she is about and what must be done. So these are the few things that we are doing to make sure that we achieve the Africa we want by the next 20 or the next 50 years. And so let's put our resources together and make sure that we are able to achieve. We shall now go to our chair, who would wrap up and then give the final remarks. Thank you so much, Prof.
The panel discuss many issues, which is very important concerning the education, higher education in Africa. The first issue discussed was the Agenda 2063. The most, I think, the most important thing said about that is in 20 years' time, Africa will be fully populated. So instead of having ignorant and unproductive people, it's better to have educated and qualified people. This is why we have to take this agenda as serious. Also, the panel discussed the sustainable development and the role of curriculums in sustainable development. And it is said that we have to think in a different way. I think for myself, herbal medicine is one example of this new way of thinking. Some new engineering disciplines like mechatronics, which involve computer science, engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, so many disciplines. So when we think about this, we will end up with good results. Also, the panel talk about the role of women in higher education. To me, the role of women is an obsolete question, because women are already indulged in the higher education, and we have this the professors with us, and also lastly the panel discussed the matter of okay, I will that's enough, and thank you for hearing and for contributing, and the youth contributed in very good ideas, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This session has been chaired by Professor Abdelfattah Bilal Abdelsalam Elabbas.
Thank you.
And he is the Dean, Faculty of Engineering, African International University, Sudan. Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you very much.
We also had Professor Siham Mohamed Ahmed Bakhit, and she's the Vice Chancellor, Alzaiem Alzaari University in Sudan. And thank you so much, Prof, for coming. We're also privileged to have Mr. Fred Awaah. He is a lecturer at the Department of Business Administration, University of Professional Studies, and a former Secretary General, All African Students Union. Prof, in the making. Thank you so much for coming. We also want to thank you, Professor, in the making, Dr. Makuku, Quality Assurance and Harmonization Expert here at the Association of African Universities. Thank you for sharing knowledge with us. And Professor Clement Dzidonu, the President, Africa. I don't know why I always mention Africa instead of Accra. But yes, Accra Institute of Technology, that is AIT. Thank you so much, Prof, for coming and sharing your wonderful thoughts and ideas on how we'll be able to achieve the Africa we want. On this note, shall we put our hands together for our chair and panelists? Tomorrow we are meeting at the University of Professional Studies, and that is where we are discussing centrally the theme for African Universities Week. That is the role of the young people in the Africa we want. If you have the program outline, when you return to Wednesday, we are not meeting here. The first panel will be looking at women's participation in leadership and vis-a-vis achieving the Africa we want. And that will be the first panel. The second panel would also be developing strategic young leaders for the future of Africa, which is very important. And this panel is made up of student leaders. They are going to share their ideas, what they think they must do to make sure that strategically they develop Africa. We're so much privileged to have our academics and vice chancellors come listen to the young ones and know the ideas that they will share. Then finally, we will look at the theme for African Universities Week, and that will also be discussed by young people. Some of them are student leaders, and there's some great students that we have. So tomorrow we are not meeting here, we'll be at the University of Professional Studies. Vehicles may convey us to the place. On this note, I would want to thank everyone, especially our wonderful delegation from Sudan who have sat throughout the entire presentation. Secretary General, Professor Etienne Hile, who has also sat throughout the presentation. Thank you so much for the time you spent. We know your desk is full, and so we appreciate the time. To our media men and to everybody who has spent time with us, on behalf of the entire association, we say thank you, and we draw the curtains on day 2 of African Universities Week. Thank you.